Midnight Motorist is one of the biggest mysteries in the FNAF franchise and perhaps the biggest mystery of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, the 7th installment in the series that most fans call FNAF 6. The game was released on December 4th, 2017, which was over a year after the latest FNAF game Sister Location with its custom night DLC, released on December 1st, 2016. At previous times before, the developer of the FNAF games, Scott Cawthon, tried to end the series game after game starting from FNAF 3. He kept uploading for many different reasons, one being to respond to the critics surrounding the latest released game and therefore be able to improve himself by making another, better one. The second reason, well, keeping the community alive, but the third reason was to clear up certain mysteries and ambiguities that had emerged from the game that no one could fully solve. This was the main driving force for Scott on making FNAF 6, since he wanted a closure to the story he had created and worked on for the past 3 years. Scott's way on revealing the hidden story of FNAF was by taking the player through some hidden minigames. FNAF 6, however, had the 3 by far biggest and lore-heaviest minigames, especially around this era of FNAF. These games were Fruity Maze, Security Puppet, and Midnight Motorist. Fruity Maze was made by Scott to show us how William Afton, the antagonist of the series, lured the children at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza into a safe room where he could kill his victims. The way this is showed is at the end of the minigame, where we see a rabbit peeking out from the dirt, presumably Afton, who is strongly associated with a yellow rabbit suit, a dead bleeding dog, and a coffin. These items are then explained in the ending scene of the minigame, where Susie is crying with Afton behind her, dressed as the yellow rabbit, telling her he is not really dead, he is over here. Follow me. This means that Afton somehow managed to kill Susie's dog and later used her pet as a way of luring Susie into a safe room where he could kill her. Her death is mainly implied to have happened thanks to the coffin that we see in the minigame. The next minigame is Security Puppet, where the security puppet inside its music box watches over children near the entrance or exit of the pizzeria. In the corner, it tells us that our goal, aka the puppet's goal, is to prevent children from exiting the pizzeria and that our color code is green. However, no such color appears except for the puppet's own green eyes, and the kids who approaches the entrance wears bracelets with colors of either blue, pink, or orange. It is safe to say that the puppet's goal is to protect children with green bracelets, but no such child appears in the first 2 gameplays of this minigame. In the third, however, we see that 3 bullies have blocked off the puppet's music box with presents, preventing him from protecting his assigned child, and that the child he is supposed to protect, Charlotte, has been locked outside the restaurant. Once the puppet manages to leave the music box, the girl is gone, and while leaving the building, we stumble upon their corpse in the back alley. It is presumed that Charlie had been murdered, and that the murderer only left behind his wheel tracks from his car. Speaking of wheel tracks, the third minigame, Midnight Motorist, is titled Later That Night in the game files, where we see a car speeding through a highway. It is therefore assumed that the events in Midnight Motorist takes place immediately after the events in the Security Puppet minigame, and that the driver is Charlotte's killer. After completing the first 3 laps, the player can unlock a different path by placing their car in the bottom of the screen, where an opening will appear. The music changes and you're suddenly not driving in the highway. One thing about the music that the FNAF theorist Hyperdroid pointed out in his FNAF music analysis was that this soundtrack's guitar riff is similar to a riff in the song Hitchin' a Ride by Green Day. The meaning behind the music is about someone going through struggles with alcohol and getting off the wagon to hitch a ride, telling us that the driver in this minigame is driving under the influence. By following the path, you'll stumble upon a mound of dirt in a clearing space, a bar named Junior's where the bouncer tells us that we've been banned, presumably after going drunk, and then the house. The house belongs to the player, who fans calls Mustard Man, and inside the house we see someone watching TV, telling us that we need to leave him alone tonight and that he had a rough day. Once we continue, we see that there is a locked door leading to a room and that whoever locked the door refuses to open it. The player then says, "I'll find a way in from outside." By going outside and around the house, we can see that one of the windows has been broken and that the person inside had ran away, hinted via the footprints. There is also more footprints that are different from the others and are made by 3 toes, but we'll get into this later. Mustard Man then says, "Ran off to that place again, he'll be sorry when he gets back." And then the minigame ends. This minigame, compared to the other 2, was way harder for the fans to solve, and has since the game's been released remained unsolved for 7 years. The reason for Scott to make FNAF 6 was to clear up certain ambiguities, but as of this minigame, more mysteries had emerged. Who is Mustard Man? Who is the person watching TV? Who is the Runaway Kid? What is burned in the clearing? Where did the Runaway Kid run off to? Why are there footprints? The answer to the first mystery about Mustard Man's identity was revealed almost 7 years later in 2024. In 5 Laps at Freddy's, whose race map is a recreation of Midnight Motorist's map, reveals an antenna depicting a yellow rabbit on Mustard Man's purple car, a character that William Afton is strongly associated with. Thus, it is revealed to be William Afton, who in the games is portrayed in purple, a color that is the complete opposite of Mustard Man's yellow. But there are still 5 questions left that haven't been so easy to piece together along the years. The person watching TV has been theorized to be William's wife, but at that time of the game's release, the community still didn't know much about her, and it would be weird to introduce her into a franchise that at that point in time was meant to end. Spoiler, FNAF never ends. However, a stronger theory suggests that this person is meant to be William's son, Michael Afton, aka the Foxy Bro who in the FNAF 4 minigames wears a grey t-shirt and who in his location watches TV after each night shift. Personally, I believe this theory way more and it has more evidence to back it up. Not only that, but both Foxy Bro and TV Guy talks in grey text, which is yet another detail that the developer chose to include. Speaking of Afton, what is known about them is that the family consists of William, his 2 sons Mike and Dave, as well as his daughter Elizabeth Afton. So if Mike is the TV guy, then by process of elimination, the Runaway Kid must be David Afton. David is portrayed in FNAF 4 minigames to constantly cry over his fears about the animatronics and often runs away from Fredbear's to his home. What does the Runaway Kid do? Well, he runs away from home and into the forest. But where did he go? Well, by looking at the path that David's footprints make and compare it to the map, it is assumed that he went straight to the upper left corner. This is the exact same place where William Afton came from with his car, specifically from Fredbear's family diner. It is therefore assumed that David ran off to Fredbear's, a restaurant that we see David constantly visiting in FNAF 4. But then we have the bigger footprints and the dirt pile. Seriously, what is this? Well, remember that this game came out in December 2017, which was 5 months after the latest FNAF book at that time, The Twisted Ones, a book that introduced us to the so-called twisted animatronics. Animatronics that in reality appear as deteriorated robots with a plastic-like suit. With the help of illusion discs will appear as organic monstrous creatures. But if the 3-toed footprints outside the house comes from a twisted animatronic, then which one of the twisted ones is it? Does it matter? Of course it does. Something that is heavily implied to happen in Midnight Motorist is that the Runaway Kid follows the animatronic that made the footprints to a pizzeria. This is even hinted in the later books as well, as in the movie where we see an animatronic taking a kid with them to Freddy's. But the animatronics from both cases are different and not the same character. So which one is it? My answer is neither of them, and in fact, I believe that it is Nightmare, aka Shadow Freddy. As many of you know, this theory about Shadow Freddy being an animatronic behind the footprints was already suggested by FNAF in his Ultimate Midnight Motorist theory. It does make sense, given the fact that Shadow Freddy is often portrayed as the character that wants to be followed. In the FNAF 3 minigame, he tells us, "Follow me," and again, in the Twisted Ones, Shadow Freddy is being followed by Charlie's friends out in the woods. However, Shadow Freddy is not a physical animatronic, and therefore couldn't have literally made those footprints. But there is however another animatronic that can appear as a shadow even though being an actual robot, and that is Nightmare, a twisted animatronic that in the games are called Nightmare animatronics, basically meant to be the same scary characters. Again, the twisted ones are real robots, hence the footprints, but with the help of illusion discs appear as monstrous creatures. Now, I recommend that you watch FNAF's Midnight Motorist theory after this video, but I will say that I disagree with one part of his theory. FNAF theorized that the dirt pile is a grave and that it is hinted in Through the Maze to be Susie's dead dog that Afton buried. It is hinted via the dead dog, flowers and the coffin, as well as a rabbit coming up from the ground, presumably telling us that Afton was behind the burial of Susie's dog. But this theory then causes the timeline issue, and from both the FNAF movie and Into the Pit game, it is assumed that the cupcake is possessed by Susie's dog. In the movie, we see how violent the cupcake is towards Carl, and personally, I can see how its violent behavior is caused by its possession of a dog. In Into the Pit, it is also portrayed to be a violent robot towards Guest. Just like how Susie was close to her dog, the cupcake is close to Chica, animatronics possessed by Susie and her dog. They are literally together after their deaths. Then there is this sound at the end of the minigame. In all 3 minigames, we either see or hear something related to cars, and therefore FNAF assumed that this was a way of showing how the 3 minigames were connected to each other. Sure, Midnight Motorist takes place later that night after the Secured Puppet minigame, and it would be strange for Through the Maze to not happen around the same time. And to that, there's this detail: Susie's dog. Here is how it looks like before being killed, and this is afterwards. Notice there is a large space between its head and tail. Well, right after that, we hear this car sound. I believe that this weird space is a way of showing us how Afton with his car hit and crushed the dog, which in turn causes this warning sound we see at the end. Not only that, but this sound might just be a simple clue that Scott chose specifically to make us connect Orange Guy with his purple car to the man wearing the yellow rabbit suit, Afton, showing us that they're the same guy. That is to say, I don't think the car sound is supposed to connect Susie's dog with the dirt pile. I only believe that this sound is only supposed to connect Orange Guy to the man wearing the yellow rabbit suit. Car reference equals Afton. It is just as simple as that. Sure, the dirt pile could still be Susie's dog and that Susie got murdered way after this event during the MCI in 1985, but then the question is, who possesses the cupcake? But why is the yellow rabbit shown like this in Fruity Maze? Well, the coffin might just be hinting at Susie's death, given the fact that we see gravestones later on in that game and that one of them reads Susie. These items shown in Fruity Maze might also just be a metaphor, where the bunny is in the ground digging up a grave for Susie's coffin. Mirror that to Afton killing Susie and stuffing her in a suit. He is about to bury her coffin, in reality being that he is about to kill Susie. We even see this type of showcase in real movies such as the 1990 It miniseries.
Oh, except for the one on the end. That's already taken.
Pennywise digging up graves for the Losers Club as they are about to die. But if Susie's dog isn't buried in the ground, then what is? As I've talked about how the book The Twisted Ones helped us solve who the animatronic footprints belong to, then it might answer what is buried in the clearing. Something that the Twisted Ones tend to do is to bury themselves underground during the day and later on emerge at night. My theory is therefore that Nightmare at some point after the scene where William visits the dirt pile emerged and ran to the house to then take David with him to Fredbear's. I know that this solution might be a stretch to some, but given the fact that Scott released this book months before FNAF 6 and that these creatures specifically buries themselves underground must mean something. Nightmare is even the animatronic on the front page of this very book, The Twisted Ones. Personally, I therefore believe that he is also one of the Twisted animatronics even if he doesn't show up in the book. There is one line from UCN that might help us solve why Nightmare is the animatronic behind the dirt pile and footprints, although I'm not 100% confident with the idea. So if Nightmare is a representation of William's evil, then maybe, just maybe, that would explain why Nightmare, or William's wickedness, decides to show David his father's previous evil deeds at Fredbear's. Again, this might not be the case, but I wanted to bring up this anyway. However, I still think that the twisted animatronic behind the footprints and dirt pile is Nightmare. But if these are the solutions as I'm suggesting, then what is the meaning behind Midnight Motorist? What was Scott trying to tell us? What mystery was Scott trying to solve for us? Well, in FNAF 4, there's one scene where David tries to go into the pizzeria, but as he approaches the animatronics, his imaginary friend says, "No, don't you remember what you saw? The exit is the other way." What did he see? Well, if David ran off to Fredbear's as seen in Midnight Motorist, then he likely would have stumbled upon Charlie's corpse next to the puppet. William even says, "Ran off to that place again. He will be sorry when he gets back. He will be sorry when he gets back." That is the answer to what David saw that eventually made him afraid of the animatronics. By looking at this image from a teaser to FNAF World from the developer, this scene becomes much clearer. What is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. David followed the shadow animatronic Nightmare, and in his eyes he misunderstands the whole scene, where he thinks that puppet killed Charlie since the animatronic is lying next to Charlie's corpse. That then makes David afraid of the animatronics, believing that his favorite character Fredbear will kill him too, hence why he doesn't want to visit the animatronics at Fredbear's. He will be sorry when he gets back. During the events before Midnight Motorist, David runs away from home to Fredbear's, but after this incident he does the complete opposite as shown in the FNAF 4 minigames. Now he runs away from Fredbear's to his home. Also, another detail that I noticed that might explain why Afton is orange in Midnight Motorist instead of purple is his text color when he speaks. Compare that to Plushy Fredbear, who also speaks in yellow text. Not only that, but both of them knew what David saw, and since Afton is the only one that knows what David saw, this would then be a way of further tying Afton to the man watching his son through the Fredbear plush. A potential answer to a mystery using evidence that was published before FNAF 6, including the details of the Twisted Ones. So now that we have all answers, I believe that the meaning behind Midnight Motorist is to show what David Afton saw that eventually started his fear of the animatronics, and how his father's involvement made it all worser. But what do you think? Do you still believe FNAF and that the dirt pile is the burial of Susie's dog, or is it a nightmare animatronic who in the books hides underground during the day? Leave a comment down below and don't forget to share this video, like it, and if even better, subscribe. That's it for me. Thanks for listening.